After my vehicle mishap, my parents picked my brother's award over visiting me. I refused their offer to bail him out of a fraud issue with my savings. I, 32F, had a terrible vehicle accident 2 weeks ago. As I drove home from work, another car hit me from the side. My car flipped after the impact. Paramedics said I was lucky to be alive. I needed emergency surgery for internal bleeding, 2 cracked ribs, and a broken leg. After the procedure, I spent a week in the hospital recovering and trying to understand. Hospital life was intellectually and physically taxing. All I wanted was my parents to visit me when I woke up. I figured they would rush over after hearing about the tragedy. I would have loved a visit even though I didn't expect them to stay. Instead, they disappeared for days. They never showed up when I called or visited. Maybe 4 days passed before they texted me. To answer your question, my parents were informed. The hospital told me they had contacted them multiple times and are my emergency contacts. The hospital called my parents a day after my stay, but the nurses seemed unconcerned. That bothered me a lot, but I tried to explain it by stating they were too busy or something else had happened. I kept my phone because my belongings survived the crash. Every day I texted my folks every 5 to 6 hours but never heard back. In the hospital, every day was hell. Because I wanted to see my friends, I gave my parents a lot of leeway. But it got harder every hour. My friends in other states were able to contact neighboring family members, so I wasn't alone. On my 6th day in the hospital, a family friend visited and commented on how great it was that my brother was being honored at an awards ceremony. I had no idea what she was talking about. She explained, but seemed surprised I didn't know. Unfortunately, my parents didn't visit. Instead, they attended my brother's awards ceremony. They knew I was in the hospital, but they attended my brother's big event instead of aiding me. They took so long to contact me because they were busy preparing for his big event. They cared more about his ceremony than their daughter's injury. Before anyone accuses me of jealously admiring my brother, let me clarify. I can see why they'd be proud of him. I know he is talented and worked hard at everything. His golden child status has always been an issue. He has been lauded for everything he achieved since we were kids. But I have gone undetected. He works for a big company and is successful, therefore this honor meant a lot to him. However, I was recovering from surgery. Calling or visiting me would have been the least they could have done. I only wanted my parents to worry about me. They didn't care that I may have died that day. I was ashamed and outraged. I failed to explain my parents' conduct. I then contacted them to express my outrage. I texted them to express my surprise that they put my brother's reward before me. I complained about their not checking on me. I didn't have to wait long for an answer for the first time since the accident, and I wish they hadn't. I felt worse after their statements. They initially justified their behavior by saying they couldn't miss my brother's once-in-a-lifetime honor. If they had come to visit me sooner, they wouldn't have missed the event. Once they gave up arguing with me, they told me it was ridiculous to waste time coming to see me since my brother was doing the family proud. No words can describe how much that hurt. They treated me like a side note. Wish I could claim their behavior surprised me, but it's always been like way. My childhood brother was perfect. His every move was lauded. He accomplished everything. Scholarships, expensive jobs, and excellent grades were honored. In the background, I was always there. It was never enough, even when I did well. My mistakes were considered disasters, and I never received the same aid. I felt like they had already decided I was a failure, and nothing I did would change that. A week after my brother's award ceremony, my parents suddenly visited the hospital. I was confused because I had stopped contacting them after our last conversation. Knowing my parents, I knew they weren't worried when they visited me. They appeared wearing fake smiles and holding bouquets. It was clear they were thinking about something else when they tried to talk to me. Since I knew what they were thinking would annoy me, I advised them to just say it. They offended me by showing little regard for my survival. I didn't need their fake sympathy. Not much effort was required. My mother cried when she heard my brother was arrested for fraud at his company. My brother was involved in a massive fraud scheme found by his employer. He falsified corporate accounts to invest in his own investments. When an internal inquiry, the police arrested him when a coworker contacted superiors. He faces substantial charges of wire fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. He had already cost my parents a lot of money on lawyers. They came to me because they couldn't afford his bail. They urged me to use my AITA project manager savings to aid him. They also asked whether I knew anyone who could help or pull strings. I felt like a tool to clean up my brother's filth, not their daughter. Mental and physical pain persisted. I couldn't believe they needed me after everything. Feeling slapped in the face. They didn't care while I was scared and alone in a hospital bed after surgery, but now their favorite child was in danger, so they needed me. I regretted it. Perhaps I should have helped my family. But my other side was outraged. Why save my sibling who has always had everything? My parents constantly shielded him, because he's never been punished. Now they expect me to comply. I declined to help. I replied I wouldn't help him even if I had the money. I reminded them that they hadn't come to see me and showed them who they cared about more. They called me self-centered and said families should be together. Despite their warnings that I would regret not assisting my brother, I didn't care. To be honest, my brother always came first. I was never enough for them. Whatever my efforts. They wanted me to forget all the times they ignored me, left me out, and made me feel unimportant now that they needed me. I was in control for the first time in my life and wouldn't let go. I'm angry and remorseful in my hospital bed. My parents haven't spoken to me since I said no, and I know they're upset, but I can't care anymore. I've given up on their approval. Too much time was spent. AITA for standing up to my parents after everything they've done to me and not assisting my brother. They keep saying family should stay together, so I feel like the villain. I cannot get over how they have treated me throughout my life, especially now. My patience is exhausted, but I don't know what to do. First update. Hello everyone, I appreciate your support of my first article. I kept my job because of that. I didn't expect to update so quickly, but a lot has happened. A few days after my parents arrived, I was released from the hospital. Although I can walk, my leg fracture requires crutches, and breathing is difficult while my ribs heal. I looked forward to returning home, finding peace and escaping the chaos. Upon entering my residence, that hope was destroyed. I knew things wouldn't go well when I saw my parents, so were standing at my door. Since I hadn't told them my discharge time, they must have called the hospital. They wasted no time. They hammered me before I could take my keys. They were furious and told me I had gone too far by not aiding my brother. I've never seen them that angry. They were more upset with my refusal than my brother's dishonesty. They preached family firstness ceaselessly. They called me selfish and vengeful. Because I resented my brother, they said I was vengeful. They didn't care that I was healing from my near-death experience a week before. They saw me as a barrier to save their son. They dared to claim I should lead now. They stated I could prove I wasn't a letdown and could be part of the family by acting morally. It was wild. They accepted that I wasn't connected and that aiding my brother was my only way to apologize. When I told them I wouldn't, everything went south. I heard my mother wailing at my door, saying, "We've lost one child, and now we'll lose two, and you're punishing us for loving him more." Instead of shaming me, my dad got angrier. He continually called me cold-hearted and self-centered, that I didn't care about the family and would regret it once they died. Seriously, I did everything I could to keep it. Despite being exhausted from the hospital and unable to stand on my crutches, I was told I was a bad person for not cleaning up my brother's mess. My parents purposefully treated my brother better and loved him more than me, which made things worse. I persisted. If they didn't leave, I'd call the police and won't pay his bail or legal fees. They stopped but insulted me again. A few days after the door attack, my brother's case grabbed news. It appears the deception was far larger than we thought. Police found evidence that he had been transferring business funds for over a year, some of which had been laundered through false business accounts in his name. In a larger investigation, they learned that he helped other co-workers hide embezzled monies. In addition to fraud, my brother is charged with conspiracy and money laundering. He might serve a long sentence if convicted. The aftermath is severe. My folks are panicked. After proclaiming my brother's achievements to everyone they knew for years, his reputation was shattered. They're not getting anywhere by saying it's all a misunderstanding and will be resolved. My dad lost a major client after his son's fraud case went public. They're stumbling and clearly confused. Of course, they stumbled back to me. They showed their desperation this time. Given their tension, they requested my help once to get through this. They said if I assisted my brother, they could solve things and keep the family together. But I knew what that meant. Keeping families together means maintaining the image that their ideal child has done nothing wrong, and fixing things means hiding his mistakes. After I repeated no, they went silent. No calls, texts, nothing. Truthfully, they seemed to have abandoned me. They probably see me as a hopeless loser who left the family when they needed her. You know what? I'm done caring. This is my first time feeling in power. I knew my parents saw me as a backup. Controlling if something goes wrong hurts. However, it feels great to finally prioritize myself and say no. I won't help my brother to placate them, and I won't let them use guilt to persuade me to fix their mess. They must now face their choices' consequences. Second update. Since several of you have asked about my condition, things have gotten worse. My brother emailed me, he convinced a friend who still denies his guilt to contact me on his behalf since he can't use a phone in prison. Initially, I considered removing it without reading. I thought it was another guilt-based request for help. But curiosity won, and I opened it. In the email, my brother claimed framing. Although he denied masterminding the scam at his company, he admitted to participating. He alleges his superiors manipulated him to cover their sins. He even claimed that strong executives could move freely while he was locked, taking the fall. He begged me for help, not for our parents, but he believed I was the only one who could save the family. This line angered me. It could be, because I told a close lawyer friend about the issue. They could not provide me a legal analysis because they were not involved. They did advise me on where to find more information. My brother's story wasn't wholly false after more research. He was clearly a fraudster. He didn't seem to be in charge, though. The scam plan affected others. Many high-level executives used my brother as a pawn to transfer corporate funds for years. Since he managed specific accounts, he was entirely accountable for problems. Because these bosses avoided grunt work, my brother was left holding the bag. I was conflicted after knowing this. I was furious he was participating in something so shady. He was involved in a severe crime, whether he was the mastermind or a pawn. His involvement was not accidental. He completed because he knew how. He undoubtedly assumed he would never be caught. I felt sorry for him, though. Knowing he was exploited by stronger and better at disguising their tracks is hard. It's clear those execs knew their jobs and made sure my brother would suffer any unwanted effects. Not being raised in a household that encouraged shortcuts as long as you were successful on the outside made me wonder how things would have ended out. He probably thought he was invincible due to our parents' constant love and protection. My family was quite quiet when I told them what I found. I think they knew my brother wasn't innocent, even though they didn't say so. Instead of admitting the truth, they kept telling me I was selfish for not prioritizing the family and heartless for not helping him. Speech to them was like talking to a stone wall. I've decided to cease talking to them. My decision is final. Despite his attempts to blame the executives, my brother made his bed and must lie about it. If they encourage him, my parents are at fault. If the tables were turned, I wouldn't waste my time helping someone who wouldn't help me. I haven't felt so comfortable in a while. I know I chose well, even though my family won't believe it. I'm tired of being ignored for too long. Although my brother's situation is terrible, I'm not responsible for correcting it. Thank you again, everyone who has helped me. It hasn't been easy, but knowing I'm not alone has been comforting. It's been over a month since my last post, but I have enough information to tell you. First, my parents recognized insulting and pleading with me didn't work. They did something else, making me much more miserable. They phoned my aunts, uncles, and cousins to express their disgust and selfishness for not assisting my brother. They implied that I was sitting on a lot of money and refusing to help out of spite. All they said was I was a monster and untrustworthy. I didn't know my parents were spreading negativity about me until one of my cousins told me. They cleverly ignored the fact that they left me in the hospital and hadn't contacted me since, misrepresenting me as resentful. I was merely called to help my brother. It ached at first. Even when I defended myself, I felt punished again. I thought I would be alone with no support. However, something unexpected happened. Instead of helping my parents, several distant cousins contacted me. It turns out that my parents' attitude of others and relentless focus on my brother soured many relationships over the years. No idea how deep this was. I heard stories from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, and each one was more shocking than the last. An aunt told me my brother borrowed a lot of money from her spouse to invest in a business. The plot failed, and my parents cut connections with my aunt when she tried to get her money back. They even claimed my aunt was avaricious and unsupportive of our family. My brother blamed a parking lot attendant for my uncle's car crash at a family event a few years ago, according to another cousin. My parents supported him and kept the rumor quiet to avoid embarrassment. They said my uncle tried to smear my brother's reputation by addressing them. In other cases, my parents covered up my brother's misbehavior or suppressed anyone who spoke out. According to one relative, my parents damaged my brother and another family member's business collaboration because they thought the relative wasn't famous enough to be associated with their son. Hearing this was shocking and comforting. I wasn't crazy. Indeed, my parents had long ignored others and hid behind my brother. I used to think I was to fault for my parents' attitude, that I wasn't good enough. I now realize it was never about me. At all costs, they wanted to protect my brother. They even avoided family members who questioned or blocked them. I built a strong life despite their disapproval, which is why my parents needed my help. I've built good contacts and managed my funds well as a project manager for a respectable company. I've saved and invested wisely. My parents panicked because they knew I had the money. They didn't comprehend I didn't want to help, because I could, especially for those who've treated me like an afterthought my whole life. The case of my brother has been updated. After I declined to bail him out, my parents raised enough money from loans and favors. However, the investigation continued. A few weeks ago, my brother decided to help authorities. I believe he I helped the prosecution by revealing the scam's higher-ups. Cooperation reduced his punishment. He will serve a year and then do community service instead of prison. Personally, that doesn't help. His cooperation is good. But that doesn't change his early plot participation. I don't think this will change my brother either. He probably won't stop having my parents clean up his mess. I've cut off touch with my parents forever, something I should have done earlier. I blocked them on all platforms. I even told my building's front desk to bar them if they returned without notice. I'm sick of being their backup. Or emotional goal. Interestingly, I'm not depressed, though I expected to miss my family. Leaving felt liberated. I can now live my life without comparing myself to my brother or begging for attention from those who would never give it to me. Family members who reached out were amazing. I finally feel supported and not alone thanks to them. I discovered a family after years of my parents excluding me, which is strange. Since many of these relatives have welcomed me to family occasions without my parents, I'm excited to get to know them better. My aunt regretted not recognizing the problem sooner. She said she always thought my parents treated me wrong, but she didn't want to fight. Along with other family members, she is now one of my strongest supports. Despite not knowing the future, I feel hopeful for the first time. Your assistance throughout this journey was much appreciated. Reading your comments made me understand I wasn't crazy for standing up for myself, even though it was hard. Finally, taking responsibility of my life feels fantastic.